Welcome to the 30/30 report on a Friday. We're looking at the top 30 momentum companies on the ASX and the 30 launchpad stocks. That's where the new leaders emerge from. We're also going to be looking at how to not make your trading suck. Last week, we told you how your trading sucks, but we're also going to look at the things that traders do to make sure that it doesn't. And we're also looking at the rotation within markets because we have been noting for some time metals and rare earth elements. Minerals have been starting that rally, coming out of that launch pad and then moving into the market leadership. That's that rotation that we're talking about. And then the standard things. We're going to be looking at the top momentum companies, analyzing the charts, looking for the setups and the studies and things to learn from the markets. And then also the ones that are coming from the launch pad, those up and coming leaders where the minerals were, and to identify those next rallies. The list that Gary's going through, he gets it on a Thursday afternoon at the same time that YouTube members do. Thank you very much, members. If you want, you can join below to get the list at the same time, and then also share the requests. We've got a lot of requests this week, and that's partially because what we're seeing right now is a very strong momentum market. Good morning, Gary. It's a lot to cover. How are you?
Yeah, no, pretty good. Pretty good. Yeah, we did. Probably just didn't want to. I mean, I probably felt a little bit not too harsh there, but just I was worried we might have. Hopefully, we didn't offend too many people with while you're trading sort of sucks. But that, to be honest with you, Chris, that first 10 minutes of last week, I'm going to probably watch that half a dozen times here over the next 6 months there, because that might be the best advice I give anyone in 10 minutes. Really having spent sort of 20 plus years in the market and kind of where to look and what we should be doing there. But those are all things that you shouldn't be doing. So if you can eradicate those, you should go a long way to sort of, getting better and getting profitable. And I think the other thing too, as a trader too, you just could be careful that, is how you use language as well, in your trading. So, and, if your trading does suck there, don't get negative, frustrated. And, you can be, as traders, we often beat ourselves up. That's sort of something which does come when you're going through a tough time. So I think it's important sometimes to actually look at what you're doing right and give yourself a little bit of a tick and a pat on the back for acknowledging the things that you actually have improved on over time, and just keep trying to add to that. So rather than, because no trader's perfect here, and as every trader's got, Callum Aggie is probably one of the most successful traders, seen the market here for the last sort of 10 years. And he's only got a win rate of around 33% or something like that. So he's losing a lot. So he's making a lot of mistakes, and he's still making mistakes. So just be careful not to beat yourself up. So acknowledge all the things you're doing right. Just try and work on, and adding a few positive things into your game as well. So as a traders there, we're just really trying to improve. And another thing I would say, just keep that learning. Don't keep it too broad. Don't go out and try to learn everything. I would try and focus the learning on a narrow subset and just become really good at a finite number of things, rather than trying to learn a little bit about everything. Because, I made that mistake over the first 2 decades of my life, just trying to read everything, trying to understand everything, trying to, which is nice to have a lot of knowledge there, but it doesn't help the P&L. Might help you improve a little bit, but doesn't have that big change there. The P&L has shifted for me personally after I've narrowed my focus, got narrower and narrower, and the more narrow my focus has got, the better my P&L has got. So that says it all.
Yeah. Well, I know that's what you're saying echoes sort of Dr. Steinberg and that kind of thing, is staying positive on looking at what you did positively. Don't necessarily look at the outcome, look at the process that you adopted. And if you ended up getting stopped out and then it ended up rallying, so be it. As long as you applied your rules correctly, then you've got to applaud yourself on that, because it will happen. And what I want to ask you is something you just said then, was sort of narrow on focus. So if the market changes and your strategy is no longer showing up, and I know this happened with you and your 0, 1, 2, 3s, there just weren't any setting up. Do you go and find something else, or do you sort of review your strategy, understand the ebbs and flows, and then get to know it more intimately? So what do you do if your strategy's no longer showing up?
Yeah, you still have those in your bag, but I think there are times there where, if you don't have too many, just kind of keep a few in your bag there. Then you just, like the ones that are working, just keep continuing with those until they stop working. So, the VCPs are all humming and then floating there. Well, the cup and handles are all working, or pull flags, whatever it is you're trading. If they're going through a really sweet spot, then you just keep rolling with that sweet spot until they sort of stop working. And then, and I think over time too, if you have a narrow playbook too, Chris, then you probably get a feel to when they're going to work, when they're not going to work as well. So, and maybe when to put the put down, when not to put the put down. So, hasn't been of any sort of season if they're not working, or if the results are getting a bit shorter, then just sort of sharpen up your risk reward there. So don't go as heavy, So that's why I do like that sort of part. I do try and take a little bit off. So I sort of try and stagger into my position, and then I'll try and take a little bit off at multiples of my risk. So I'll take a little bit, keep the account ticking over, and then hopefully if it runs, I've got some that will run as well and move the needle. So it's just it's a balance there, trying to keep the account ticking over, and the balance of actually trying to make sure you have a mechanism for capturing that big one if it does take off as well. So you want to, that's the thing about trading. You've got to have that. I think you've got to nail those both down. That's the one thing that sort of professionals like I can kind of see is that they do tend to take a little bit off into heat, and they do let the big winners run. So if you don't have your momentum trading, you don't have a process that can kind of create that opportunity, and you probably need to review it.
Yeah, well, definitely, you got to let the profits run. You got to have the opportunity for them to run and keep the stops tight. Now, something you've just mentioned there is when to put the foot down, and looking at the momentum leaders this week, something that you and I discussed earlier in the week was the opportunity that's looking like it's in the market. And fortunately, we've been able to crunch a lot of data now and been able to build ourselves indicators that tell us what the opportunity looks like. And we know that in the last week, we've had high momentum days where the top 30 momentum companies have actually been stronger than 99% of the observations in the last year. So the index is up near its highs. The index not necessarily peaking because it's, you were saying before, that sort of created a VCP on the index, but the opportunities within the index are normally below that top 200. That's actually really strong. So how are you seeing the momentum list that you've looked at yesterday in the top 30 momentum companies on the ASX?
Yeah, I said to you this morning, I wasn't surprised actually that the momentum scores were up here, because the market's still pretty buoyant here, hanging pretty tight, and I felt like we had seen that rotation in the market there, where we're seeing like some of the leading sectors. So some of the financial, like CBA, pull back, gold, which have been hot, pull back, uranium, which have been hot, pull back. So we started to see some of those sectors that have been hot here have actually cooled off. Yeah, the index, look at the XDO. It has narrowed up. It's almost tightening up in a VCP sort of style here. It's really shown very little weakness. So that means the rotation's coming through. We're seeing different sectors, come through there. So the materials index, XMJ there, that's one that sort of, to me, it's sort of showing strength there. And we're seeing the Aussie rally, US dollar licking up, just seeing, countries starting to hoard critical minerals and, chopping down the copper, spiking on, so they're all going to cause supply issues, so you got supply issues and price gets forced up here. So, so I just think that's really interesting, that sort of space there. So, very healthy, Chris, for the market to be sort of seeing that. So that should be good for momentum as well. Because if we're seeing rotation, then we should start to see other stocks start to emerge and other setups there. So, yes, that's been great.
Well, with those great charts, what's the first one that we're looking at today?
Yeah, so number 11 there is that FRS there, which I think we might have featured previously there. But that's been pretty robust there. So we can see here we've had that, good buying, good press there. There's a few VCP sort of cup and handles along the way here. I know it's a little small initially, but it did have a nice little congestion there, sort of in that May-June spot there. And we've just sort of come out there. I mean, too small for me personally, but I think this is a nice sort of setup here. Just sort of shows, if you see the volume come in early, there's be good volume on the stripe here. Look, that's a really strong drive and good volume through there. And then the one thing you notice through here, let's pull back here, Chris, and look at the volume here. Just the volume just dries up completely. So if you don't see any selling coming through here, so that's why you want to see sort of strength, and then this contraction there, and then light volume. That's all we're looking for as momentum traders there. We're looking for a little bit of a break here. So we get a bit of a break on some better volume, and the stock's gone up there. So it's just a really good, it's not probably too small here, but just a good indication of sort of what the type of thing you sort of be looking for. I thought drone shield was really interesting here, Chris. This is what, 2 or 3 days ago. See how this sort of, it was interesting there because if you look at ELS, it had broken the 10 and then come down to the 20. So basically this had the 10 all the way down here. So it had sort of broken there, and EOS as well had broken the 10 as well, and even sort of broken the 20 here recently. So it started to get volatile. So those two are probably looking not as, not as strong. So starting to break some moving averages, but drone shield, look how, you can hear it sort of pull back there. I think there was sort of 1 day of sort of selling in here, then a strong first day here, and then it pulled back here, and the volume did dry up there. But what it did do is just, it held the 10 here. I remember watching this day here, thinking, wow, that is just held that 10 really strong. That's Kalanagi would have bought that. So he's looking for the strongest stocks, rocket ships there, and then they congest, and then they hold the 10-day moving average, and, and he's buying the top, 98, 99 percentile sort of stocks, strength there. So that's, people say this is too far here, but it just goes to show it's not too far. Sometimes actually, you're not showing any weakness there. They can keep going here. So, he'll be probably looking for like a range break there. So what's that, 247 there? So as soon as it breaks 247, I think it opens at 246, probably goes through 247 pretty quickly. So say he's buying at 248, 249, probably uses the opening range, maybe 1% underneath. So you buy this thing at 248, you got your stop in at say 244. That's a low risk trade, so, and then he's hoping, so it's just, that's just a sort of stock showing strength there. That's what the pros, that's the type of trade that they will do there. So, so I thought it was just interesting there that one's held up pretty good. OSM was pretty interesting now. And this is, again, had that strength, gone sideways there, bit of a cup and handle in here. And then we come through pretty strong here. That's a good breakout, good volume there. So, and again, we got another, I watched this, I think we talked about this last week, Chris, as well. Nice BCP setting up in here. The one thing you'll notice in there is that, see the volume? It's all really healthy all the way up. Pulls back in here, very light volume. Pops some good volume again. And then look at these couple of days here.
Yeah, no participation.
No selling, no selling. You've got 1 day up, the volume comes in. Next trade is down, no selling. So it's sort of got, 3 days in there where it looks like it's trying to sell off there, but no participation at all. No one trying to sell this into this sort of selling here. And then bang, we just come through the topic. So again, you can buy these little tight range breaks there. Just, whether you use a low from the previous day. But yeah, this, just seeing some really good momentum sort of stocks here. So, DTR was one actually caught my eye yesterday, Chris. Sort of had that big power pull back, now starting to tighten up in here. So we got pull back here, pull back shorter again, narrow, whole getting narrow. The thing you'll notice in here is you got a bit of selling here off the first high here, but then you get a nice volume block through here, and then pull that 1-2 days down, no selling. You jump up again, good volume. Pull back again, 1, 2, no selling. So the selling's dried up again here. So I looked at this yesterday and thought, oh, that looks really, really good there. It's just too small for me, only sort of 9 cents. But if that was a 50-cent stock,
All over it.
Yeah, that was just a really, really good setup there. So thought that looked excellent there. So, you could probably do a little starter position under the low as you come through the B wave there, add to the position. Never shows finishes on the, close with strength. You get to full position, keep your risk under 1%, and then let the market do its thing. VNM. Oh, this one was sort of interesting as well. It's just it's a bit negative in terms of the downtrend. That's what I don't like. If you look at the weekly there, it's pretty, it's been a leader before there, but that's a really big correction. So we've gone from $2.40 back to 20 cents there. So that's like a 90% correction, Chris. So that's pretty nasty. But the thing on the daily there is what does catch my eye is that volume. So all of a sudden, this rally here, that's actually pretty chunky. And then it consolidates there, does a bit of a VCP in there. Looks like it might come through here, but then it fails. So it might have given you a little bit of a false break in here, get caught, and the whole thing congests again. Eventually does a little V-wave break in here, has a tiny throwback, couple of days, but then look at that volume starts to come in. And again, we're just breaking, And I'm talking about last week being the contrarian, Chris, buying higher ground. So as this comes here through the higher ground here, the stock doesn't look back. So it starts to move here, has a little pullback there. So most people are sort of afraid to, there's an interesting stat there. I think I might mention this for probably a month or two ago. When the index makes an all-time high, we have a 45% chance the next day is going to be an all-time high. So,
Coming in clusters, and that's good reason.
Yeah, so you often see them just go back to back to back to back here. So, that's looking at, there's just good volume through there so far. So that's actually looking pretty interesting. So I thought that looked, okay. I think MTM was one there. Again, this is a pretty strong trend there. We had that cup and handle, really went pretty hot. Just started to see how it's getting looser up here, the more volatile. So it's starting to sort of show that topping type of characteristics there. So because this has held the 10 there, you shouldn't really be holding this path once it breaks the 10-day moving average. So we kind of want to sell some off here into that. Maybe you hold some back at the 20 there. But to me, that's like an overbalance. That's the largest correction of this whole move. And it's an overbalance at the top there. So we know when it overbalance, Claren will tell you it'll either go up here, make a first lower high, or it could go and make a marginal new high and overbalance there. So this either goes sideways for a period or it goes down here normally. So
they raised was it 50 million at 55 cents, I think it was. So in your experience of looking at, because we've talked about this one potentially being in monobook contention, that's possibly reviewing it to study a leader. In your experience of studying leaders and doing raises, how does that play into it? So sometimes you've talked about there being a lot of overhead resistance. A raise comes in, it puts a damper on the share price, flushes out the enthusiasm, then it goes in the doldrums for a couple of months. I think Mesoblast and other ones have been like that in the past.
Yep.
How do you look at a miner that's sort of in its stride and raising money along the way? Can it be good? Can it be bad? How do you interpret that?
Yeah, sometimes, I guess if you get caught in a raise, then I would trend straight away personally, because it sort of changes that. But seen a few times there where the raises are sort of, it's going to open the potential sort of, commercialization for the stock, the company, or
More drilling or whatever.
opens up more, it can be taken positive. So, oftentimes price action is the key as to how that raise is taken. I think Drone Shield on that first rally, there was one or two raises along the way and actually held it up pretty well. I think there might have been a little bit of a pullback. I would definitely trim half into that news and then maybe just sort of see how the price held up there. But I haven't found too many sort of good raises that have kept the price going up here. I'd rather see the John Ling takeover bid like we saw today. The stock's up, after being up 50%, it jumped up another 20. That's the sort of that's I prefer to see those type of moves than see a cap raising gun at a lower price, 10% lower. That's for sure. So, but yeah, I guess it's the price action will be important there. So if you haven't traded, see a raising here, then I would definitely hold back. I want to sort of see how that price action is absorbed there. Because one thing with those placements, Chris, is that there's always some sellers.
Yeah.
Everyone say, "Well, I'll take the stock, but I won't sell it."
I won't sell it for a couple of hours.
Yeah. So trust me, people have held up for 5 minutes, and there's a 5%
Day on it.
in one day.
Oh,
There's going to be someone who take it straight away. So
that was my introduction to broking in 05, 06, 07. Just constant mining placements, taking stag and next one.
Yeah.
I remember doing Fortescue with the equivalent of 5 cents today.
Yeah.
You just take the most to go to the next one.
Like he sells out in the first 5 minutes, and maybe only makes 5 or 6% every time, but yeah, he tends to sort of keep his head alive. So
yeah, well, we took 30% on Fortescue, but hindsight, anyone who was a part of that placement, if they just kept it, well, they'd all be done.
yeah.
But that's cap raises, and you're in for a different strategy.
The stocks, and I know sort of NVU was one of the ones that's a bit of a drone, that new drone stock there. I noticed there's a nice BCP in here. Did tighten up here. It's funny, she had some good news into that the other day. So I noticed last week this was all over Twitter, NVU, on their sort of good news, but then it's obviously retreated. But the key there with that retreat was that was probably what was quite nice there, was that we had 3 or 4 days of retreating, but that didn't see any selling. So and then it sort of gapped up here. So yeah, so sometimes when you see that good news, sometimes it can draw in a little bit of a few sellers there. But the key there is just to watch for the reaction there. Because I mean, you got to remember, sometimes the insiders who are sitting there, they can only really get out when there's liquidity, and the only time there's liquidity is when there's good news event, hopefully driving some in. So that can sometimes you think, oh man, that's good news. Why is that stock? Why can't that stock make any
rally on it?
Yeah, because the insiders have only got, maybe they get 3 or 4 days a year to try and get a liquidity back. Yeah, so oftentimes, they've got him at such a low price. They're not worried so much about price there. They're just worried about getting a line out into liquidity. So that's the thing that sort of can sort of can seem a little bit unusual at times, but that's how the market works, unfortunately.
Yeah, if they've been working on a deal for months and months and months, can't talk about it. They know it's lingering. They can't sell because that's insider information. Then when they announce the news, suddenly what they've been working on for 9 months, stopping them from selling, is announced. They can suddenly trade because they're no longer withholding information or trading on inside information. And yeah, they dump the stock on good news. So that does seem counterintuitive, but that's how it happens. You asked, we have a fair few requests, so we might try to punch through them pretty quickly. Just on the momentum list still, we've got EWC, Echo Whiskey Charlie.
EWC, yeah, look, it's a bit of, obviously you got a spike there, so you got to sort of see how it absorbs there. Has drawn a bit of selling in those sort of after the high there. We've had 4 days of pretty decent selling there. So we want to sort of see this try and rally here, a bit of volume come in, pull back, volume start to dry up, but has attracted a bit more selling than you'd like. But I guess it is up 2.5 to 9, so we expect some sort of selling in that, but you want to see that absorbed there. But
and you probably want to see it stay in the top half of that range, the breakout point to the high.
Yeah. I mean, as we know, Chris, some of those we covered some of those model stocks there when they initially spiked and then consolidated. Some of them can be like 1 month to like 3 or 5 or 7 months. So that's why sometimes you just gotta be like the assassin on the hill there. Give you waiting 3 months for the kill shot. So that's that
could be it. But definitely keep that on the radar because it joins your 100% club. PUA, Papa Umbrella Alpha. Yeah, that was on the list. Yeah.
So look, that's pretty healthy. So the thing is, we haven't seen much of a consolidation there. But what we have seen is just pretty steady, chunky, consistent volume there. So that's actually a pretty good sign. So, it's pretty extended from the 10 here. So if you're long here, obviously you just got to be, maybe probably got to tighten it up there, but probably in that 10 at the moment because it's just how strong it is. But trend looks pretty robust so far. Definitely one to watch there. Maybe for those not in there, it's truthful for me personally, but I'll be wanting to sort of wait for a consolidation. But so far it's showing pretty healthy, pretty solid signs. Good volume on the drives and pulling consistently there. Like even that little phase through here, pull back. No one's selling the stock here up, even though it's up quite a bit. So even here, there's 2 days down here, not too much selling here. So yeah, so pretty constant sort of buying all up here, even up here. No selling here. Very little selling down. So looks pretty good. Yeah, it does. Yeah.
In that space once more, EOS. So it's been on the list a few times.
Yeah, just don't like the fact that it did break the 10 and the 20, and now it's sort of getting more volatile as well. So that, McLaren would say that's probably going to go through a consolidation phase here now. So for me personally, if that move, look how steep that trend is. Hasn't broken the 10 there. So, to me breaking, I would have had my stop up just underneath that 10 there. So, 258 or something like that. For me personally, I would have been out there. But yeah, they come back in, it's gone to a margin new high and then flash back again. So there's sort of like 1, 2, 3, some heavier down days in there, 4 days as well. So you're seeing some healthier selling on the down days as well. So that's what you probably don't want us, well, when we look at those stocks that are really strong and keep going, they have that little pause in the price action, but you just don't see the volume. So we're definitely seeing some selling here in here. So, and I'd hazard to say that big volume, Chris, as well. And that looks really encouraging in the big volume. Looks like, institutional type of behavior there. But I'm guessing that's probably like, with military really taking off there would have been a lot of ETS come to market there, like a defense-based sort of ETS. So that's probably caused the buying and the spike in this here. But you just have to be careful with those sector-specific ETS. They can all
be flushed out at the same time.
They can all unravel at the time, Yeah. So I mean, the people don't realize with the ETF, like I just say, it's $100 million ETF. If everyone wants to sort of buy into it, the size of that ETF can go from 100 million to say 200 million or 300 million. So it can basically double, triple in size. So it means they're going to keep buying the same stocks in that basket. Now, people start to exit that basket. Say it's gone to 400, 500 million size. People start exiting that basket. They're going to sell the same stocks in that basket. And then it sort of starts to come off there. Whereas like a LIC managed fund is a closed basket. Where it was, can't take money and out. Only the shareholders are changing in there. So you're selling to one another, whereas the ETF provider will keep making a market.
Essentially infinite.
Yeah. So it's all great when you're going up because it sort of fuels, it's probably one of the reasons. Yeah, it's probably one of the reasons why CDA and Telstra go to 30 times because they just keep buying the same sort of shares in there. And fund managers aren't that adventurous. They're probably not going to go too far wide, which is probably why a lot of small caps have under it. But people don't understand there is risk. People think that with ETFs, they're buying a basket. They're going to map that basket. And they're going to map that index. I would suggest that a lot of ETFs probably just slightly underperform the basket they're meant to follow. And when they get whacked, when that index has a pullback, that ETF will have, I think, will have a larger pullback there. And if you don't believe me, go and actually look at the ETF's performance long term versus the index you're performing.
Tracking, yeah.
And then come back to me. Yeah. So I mean, the top ETFs with are very, very liquid, everyone's in it. They're probably the safe ones. They're probably going to be very close minus Bs. But in my experience, when I was seeing long ETFs and short ETFs and double longs and double short, they should map out exactly the same. Those fees.
They're nowhere near it.
No.
And I've seen reports recently about, the ETFs aren't for the concentration. But if anyone was in Australia at the time and looked at property prices, this is a key example that if you change supply and the regional parts of New South Wales, actually physically where I am right now, that market changed dramatically. And if you look at the net migration out of those towns and the net migration in, like the net migration, the normal outflow and the normal inflow, there was only a change of about 2 or 3% for a lot of those towns. But when talking property prices moved 20, 50, 70%, it was insane. So when you do the old supply and demand curves like that, that's not what it is. And the ETFs have a similar thing. If you move the demand just a little bit, like 2%, you can have magnitudes more. And that can be what you're talking about there on that volume profile right there.
Well, it's always, people been in the market long enough, they remember warrants. And if there's only one, because like with a warrant, you can't short a warrant. And you can only be, the issue is there. So you can't short ETFs. So they'll make it inverse ETFs, to get on the other side, but you can't, so it's not a two-way market. So it's usually only a one-way, someone's making the other side there. So, mate, Wall Street's got a history of, trying to cut your lunch. So it's, there's some risk with ETFs. It worries me that people are sort of going in there blind thinking, there's no risk in these things, where I think there is some risk there. It's just way too many ETFs as well at the moment. So
there's a whole other story that I won't get into about how the Australian superannuation funds are now regulated and benchmarked against ETFs. But let's put that aside. Yeah. We've got a couple of other ones, just AR9, which is another request.
AR9. And who regulates those ETF providers, mate?
Oh, yeah. That's not. But I think we're on the same page on that one. So AR9, explosive, 100% gain plus, sitting at the top half of that range, but volatile. So how do you read that volatility and that volume profile?
Yeah. It's had a nice run there. It's a bit of a gap. It's too small for me personally, but the thing I didn't like was that all those two heavy down days there. Had a bit of a bounce there. It's come off there. So just has borrowing some sellers in there, likes as well. So a little loose here. Like, the traders there, you want to see that surge and then price action tighten up here. This is still pretty loose there. So, as Kalinagi says, loose is the losers and tight's for the winners there. So we want to see the whole thing tighten up first. So we don't, when they're too loose there, where do you put your stops? Too much risk. So, got to be careful of that.
RML, Romeo Mike Lima.
Not bad. It was just too small for me. It was a bit early for me as well. But that's had a good drive, a good volume. There's a different story there. See the selling in there? Not that much really so far, considering how much this has driven up. The big volumes here so far. So far, this is actually, it's not bad here. It's held up pretty well. So you'd love to see like an A, B, C, or just whole thing tighten up, or a VCP over time, and just congest, tighten up here. Don't see too much selling there. Maybe it can run again, but
a 300% rally and the congestion is happening in the top third. So that's ideal.
Yeah. But the one thing you've got to do with those things, because we talk about the same things, they're running up and then congesting there, but so it all sounds like, all sounds easy and practical, but it's a little harder than that. But go and study the winners. So, go and do a search on the stocks that are up the most for the last 6 months and just go through the top 20, 30 stocks and just look at why they're up and look at the setups, look at the bursts, look at the volume, look at the congestion there. Study the winners. That's that's another common trait for all great traders. Apart from sort of being focused on a narrow, they just go back and study the winners. I mean, William O'Neill, he's, they created books and books and books, model books of all the winners, all the biggest winners. They're all got the same sort of similar setups there. So if you study the winners, then you'll understand what they're doing. When they go through, congestion and contraction, you understand how long they might take, and there's certain things that'll pop up which will give you the more confidence to take the position then, rather than just sort of thinking, I just need to wait for a pullback and I'll buy it. It's not as easy as that. You got to wait for your setup. You got to wait for that tightening there. Wait for certain signatures, things to appear, which will appear over and over again if you study those winners of the past. So,
and that's exactly. I mean, I asked the question earlier. What do you do when your setup's not working? Well, that's what I do, and I've only learned that from the best traders. If your setup's not working, then just go study your setup. And exactly what Gary's saying. Go look at the past winners and find your setup in there. Know what it looks like, and print that in the back of your retina so that when your opportunity comes up. But we've digressed. We do focus on the leaks, and this is a high type flag on screen. We know from our studies that launch pads, they show us when a theme's going to light up. Uranium, lithium, gold, property trusts, they all light up the launch pad in a theme, and then they can shoot off. So you've talked about the rotation for some time and the metals. Is there anything different, or are you still sort of seeing that come through in the launchpad this week?
Well, we talked about some of those lithium names in the last week or two, Chris, which is sort of surprising us in some regard. But then we did know that some of the futures prices were just looking stronger than the spot prices, so starting to see, and we're just starting to see some of those metals move as well. So seeing quite a few of those pop up there. So I think MLX is sort of one here on the list there, number 4, which has sort of popped up there. But we saw, quite a few lithium names there pop up as well. I think PLL is sort of smaller one, but, we saw the main ones too. We saw PLS come through. IGOs come through like a nice BCP as well, popped up there. Even Mineral Resources, done a BCP here as well. So, we're seeing those patterns on some of those names there. So that's quite interesting there. Yeah. I actually thought, what was more interesting this week, Chris, was your comments there 2 or 3 weeks ago about the uranium shares, how when they keep coming up multiple times on the launch pad, that's not the best indicator of them actually running bigger. And that sort of rung in my head quite a bit, because we're seeing they've had a good run. Don't get me wrong. Obviously, there was some good trades in those uranium shares there, but they've all pulled back here. So Banana, Paladin, so they've all had a pretty decent pullback. So they look like they might have been holding the 10 and then maybe holding the 20, but they've actually all broken down here. So kudos to your data for telling us there that is not necessarily the greatest sign here, to see them kept coming up over and over in there. You only want to see them come up once or twice, and they're the ones that tend to run a lot further here. So yeah, that was useful insight.
Well, the breakdown on that is just quickly, to be a launchpad leader, you want to go from the launchpad and you want to shoot off and you want to go to the moon. But if you still keep loitering around the launchpad, you're not on your way to the moon. And mathematically, it's not possible to be a momentum leader and on the launchpad at the same time. You sort of transition out of the launchpad and you go into the momentum leader. So the MGM and those ones that we looked at more recently, like you and I off air, they don't come back to the launchpad. They can be sort of shooting up, and they can be 2 or 3 months since they were last in the launchpad, but they're just on a tear. So that's the insight into what you're talking about with the uranium. I think in a second, there's names that keep cycling through. They're not up there yet. Anyway, you've got other ones on the list. What else are you looking at?
Number 2 on the list was Premium there. So it's had a nice sort of bounce there. What I found interesting there, Chris, was, we had that sort of A, B, C come back, a little bit of an undercut of the low. So that's in one of my, part of my trade book is to have that relative strength leader, and then to basically sort of undercut the low, but, kind of staying in the top half of the chart. So did see that. What I find interesting here is the volume. So it's got some pretty decent volume on its leg here. So this is a push there, because maybe this will do again like a BCP. And we know that, in that sector there, net wealth and HUD, the other two, mate, they're humming, so they've basically gone up quite a lot there. So, Chromium is, sister stock to the leaders, but potentially, it's been a lot of talk over years of this thing getting mopped up or getting taken out, or, definitely a lot of activity in that account management space as well. Sort of share site are now doing a pretty cheap, account management sort of stuff as well. So there's definitely a little bit of action in that space. We saw a broker take someone over Stock Doctor recently, someone's, as well. So definitely a little bit of corporate action there. So PPS is definitely one to keep an eye on, just because there's a bit happening in that sector. RUL, thought this is interesting there, because a bit of a cup and handle, did sort of run up there. We've seen a few times there in the past where we've seen the lower, the lower sort of cup here make a handle, but then go up to the top again and make another handle as well. So there's a few that I've seen that, like this, come in lower, hit this level here, then make another handle, then come through. So this is definitely one to keep an eye on here. Maybe this sort of, because that's been pretty good volume so far. on that drive as well. So not too much, I wouldn't say any aggressive selling through here at all. So definitely got to keep an eye on that. Would love to see another little handle there on that. MMS, again, let's be the contrarian by the, higher ground. So then, maybe a bit volatile here this year, but basically it's broken out here. So I think, this day here, the close would have been 1636 or something like that. So it's gone on since then. Most people are afraid to break buying new highs, but has continued to sort of move on there, as we know. PDI, this is one that's been on the leaderboard a few times. This is probably the textbook, Chris. It hasn't been in the launchpad too much, but it has been in the it was sort of sitting there last year in the quarterly momentum. Yeah, quite a bit. So interesting to see that it's actually popped into the launchpad there, but it has gone through a bit of a congestion as well. So, but that's a pretty strong, slow climbing trend there. There's been a thrash back and forth below the 50, but that's, what's probably more important is just the series of high lows there. So that looks pretty constructive.
But as you've got that on there, March, April, May, June, July. So it's 3-4 months. You've said that the market leaders can go through consolidation for 1, 3, 4, 5, 7 months, which your model book has shown. And that's kind of what we've got here. And that's kind of the reset period, reload. And it's sort of dropping out of the quarterly momentum because obviously for 3 months it's traveled sideways. And then it comes back in the launch pad again, just like your model books have done. And they get on going.
Yeah, look at the weekly setup there. It's quite nice, isn't it? So yeah. So they can keep going now. There's ones there, and obviously that April low is just another higher low for the stock there, so it didn't really sort of sell off too much. PLL was another one. Okay, AHC 52-week high here, so it'll be interesting. It's a bit small here. Not the but there's the weekly set up there. So so again, potentially breaking to new highs here. So there's the first time it broke to new highs here. Maybe a second time it broke to new highs. You get a little bit of volatility usually at the breakout zone. Then we're breaking new highs, which we went on it from here. And now we're breaking new highs again here. So pretty healthy signs for that one. Again, the contrarian trade breaking to new highs. I'll only say that this week, Chris. I thought Aussie broadband looked pretty good. Yeah, and this again, we're just series of high lows building through here. The stock is overlapping, so I know McLaren would call this like an overlapping trend here. So this has had that A, B, C there. So it's sort of undercut. I like the fact that it just undercut that low there. The thing I like too is that all through this period here, it's pulled back here. There was no really aggressive selling. The only selling that came in was at the very end, which can be signs of accumulation taking place there at the low there. So if you look at that weekly, this is reasonably sort of strong trend here. It's just been trending up. It's been just building higher lows through here. I love the fact this is just an A, B, C in here. No volume until we get down in the low. And the thing I love too is like one thing that sort of Gann talked about was if you have 3 attempts at the high, so sometimes you go to the high once, go to the high second times. The third time, it can actually, you can get a fast move down on the third attempt of a high. But if you turn back up for the fourth attempt of a high, don't wait for the breakout. You just buy that stock. Because basically the fourth time, pretty much will go through 9 out of 10 times. So we've had 1, 2, 3 touches here. This thing's congested here, high lows there. Not a lot of selling going on here. So I've actually bought, I've got a reasonable position size here on this one here. So it's come out here. The volume's not awesome here so far, but you see a bit of accumulation there, and then so I thought this one looks pretty interesting now. I like the weekly setup there. So I think if it breaks this level here, it could go back to the new high there. So do like that a lot.
Big range.
Yeah. So it's a good risk reward there. I think it's around about a 7-to-1 risk reward. So those are trades I've got to take every day of the week. If it breaks down, knocks me out. That's just part of the trading. Aluka was one that I did mention during the week. Did like the signs there, seeing signs of accumulation. And yeah, did actually break a little B wave here a couple of days ago. Probably the first little signs of positivity. A little inside day and bang, a little pop here. So it's had a bit of a jump there, but wouldn't be chasing this pop. But yeah, did like the look of that. I think it looks pretty constructive there. What else we got in there? I think that's pretty much it. Chris, I think I've sort of covered most of the.
We've still got 4 recommendations or requests. One of them, the last one, I'm quite surprised about. So LRV, Lima Romeo Victor.
Yeah, I thought this was okay here. Has been a leader of the past, which is a good sign. Come back A, B, C, so undercut the low. I did notice this. I think OCC was another one, which is just Orthocell has just come back and under the home. Very similar. Had a bit of a move up here. The volume is okay there. Just had a bit of selling here. Another jump, but yeah, I don't mind it actually. I think it looks okay. Just didn't take that trade. Just that's the only thing I didn't like about it. It's had a strong move here, kind of an overbalance. So these overbalance, sometimes they can just come back and make a lower high. They can make a new high as well. Beggars can't be choosers, as they say. But yeah, it's not I'd rather sort of be buying them in those consolidations, sort of in the trend, not overbalance there. So, but yeah, still looks okay there. I think that OCC that's the other I was talking about here. That's just done something similar. Sort of pull back there, come back and undercut, and then start to build here. So that kind of looks interesting as well. But that's sort of similar as well. Again, a big drive here and then a bit of an overbalance. So that's can go through a sideways sort of move. So it doesn't makes it less appealing to me. I'd rather see the gap up, the tight congestion like that, and then rather than see them loose like this. This is sort of can be sort of topping phase here. But look, still we know these things can go back and retest the highs. So still some okay trades in there.
YRL.
YRL. Yeah, just a little too loose here for me. Yeah, pretty small volume as well.
100% gain, but that's really speed volume for 100% gain.
Yeah, you can sort of see how tricky it's been in the past as well. It's had some history of sort of gapping up and then coming back. So yeah, not a bit unreliable that one.
A name that you are familiar with, West African Resources, WAF.
Yeah, just been a lot of been some reasonable selling on a lot of goals here. So yeah, interesting.
Under the 50.
Yeah, under the 50 as well. Yeah, that's again. So just saw some heavy selling there. Just that was interesting actually. I think I mentioned last week or before that there was a macro guy I did see there. I wish I kept the post there now, but I remember sort of reading on sort of X on Twitter and stuff there. But he was talking about the last 2 major rallies in lithium, and he was saying that normally gold often weakened off just prior to these lithium rallies and stuff there. I thought it was quite interesting there. And he was talking about that about 2 or 3 weeks ago. So since then, he said, just when gold started to sort of break down, he was suggesting here that, if gold continues to break down, lithium continues to break up. That was actually seen in the past that I thought, okay, I didn't go back and back test that myself, but I thought, I wonder, you had a long-term chart there sort of trying to overlay it and show the correlation there. But interesting that it's actually, we're seeing gold weaken off here. We're seeing lithium price actually move up here. So far he's been right, but we'll see.
The last request one was Sequoia SEQ. I was surprised to see that on the list. I've not seen, but that's VCP in Australia.
Never really like trying to buy little, unlike money, stockbroking firms. I've been a part owner twice. One of them was very successful, but they like very, very well, tightly, run. So a big network as well. But yeah, most of them would struggle to sort of make some real good money. That's just it's a hard game to make big money in.
Yeah.
But yeah, I not for me.
Yeah. So that's the launch pad. And I guess we'll just come back on that point of why your trading sucks. Might have been a bit heavy, a bit harsh. You're saying how to make it not suck is really just part of it is self-reflecting on the language that you use to yourself. Be positive to support yourself through what you do right, and take the time to. You got to spend more time analyzing your own trades or analyzing the leaders, or a bit of a mix of 50-50. How would you play that?
Yeah. Even if you're actually beating yourself up as well, ask yourself questions that that you can get a positive answer for as well. Because sometimes we just we can berate ourselves as well. Eh? So it's weird actually. I've went back a couple of weeks actually, and I think I was frustrated because I've had 3 trades that sort of bucked back and knocked me out of some of them, and knocked me partially out of some as well. And I was like, oh man, 3. And went on to have like 20-30% moves, So I was like, oh, so it can get in your head a little bit sometimes. But I think it's just important asking here questions like, like why am I a successful trader? Why am I able to achieve superior returns? Why do I work hard at my trading? Why do I work harder than most people? Just ask yourself sort of positive questions, sort of that that will get you thinking. Because we all work. People who are right into this, work hard and what areas have I improved on in the last 12 months? So we just ask you those type of questions there that are sort of going to get more positive sort of reaction. I think it is, just important to stay disciplined as well, because sometimes when we have pretty tight stops, you get knocked out, can force you to be too loose and take more risk on. Then the next thing you know, you're going to bigger losses as well. So just important to sort of recognize sometimes you don't get those big wins, but you kept the account tight. Yes, you don't have you didn't get the big jump in the P&L, but you also kept it pretty tight as well. The balance is pretty much hasn't deteriorated as well. So I think it's just important to sort of to stay positive in trading as well. Just well, in the past there, Chris, I've always sort of gone back to a few things. Like I used to go back and listen to go back and watch McLaren's old tapes. But now I'll go through and actually look at the leaders now. So I'll go and find 20, 30. So whether I go through some of the old model stocks, whether I just go and look at the last, who are the strongest stocks in the last 6 months, who are the strongest stocks in the last 12 months, just bring up the 20, 30, go through the charts, either mark them up, sort of like, okay, what the volume was, trend lines, just all the things you should be looking for. And actually just drawing trend lines over those strongest names and looking at the volume, making comments on it, just studying that, it gets all the things you should be looking for to do, and to get you confident about what you're trying to do. So that's what I'll do. I just spend some time reviewing the winners. I just think that's I can't remember who it was now, whether it was Sean Ryan or sort of someone there was sort of like, rather than just reviewing the trades you took, review the trades you didn't take that you should have taken. So I think that was quite a decent insight. That was probably 12 months ago now. I took that personally, actually. I thought, well, that's actually really a deeper level there. And I have actually tried to sort of study the ones that get away, the ones that I didn't see, because I want to make sure that when I'm looking at the top 20 stocks by market cap, so big market cap and mid cap, that they're the stocks, hopefully 2/3 to, 3/4 of those stocks I'm looking at each day. They're on my watch list there. They're in my screening set. You can't get them all, but if you're looking in the right areas, and that's I think that's half the key there, is really, so if you're looking in the right areas. So, watch that first 10 minutes of last week. Don't do all those things that Benavini says that most people do, which causes them to have returns that suck. So don't do all those things, which which is what majority of traders do. Get those out of your system. Look in the right areas, keep your risk tight, trying to scale up. Larry Height, sort of says, some great, you can't win if you don't bet. And, if you don't protect your capital, you can't help bet. So, it's pretty simple. So, there's some good points in there. So you got to have a swing, but you got to control your risk as well. So that's the key. And you got to be looking at the right areas as well. So we want to be we want to be trading rocket ships. We don't want to be trading slow moving trains or buses or,
Glaciers.
things that just don't move, So we want this. It's important to look in the right. That's why the momentum there. It's just look for strength. That's the key there. Look, just look at the stocks that are up the most each day. Look at the stocks that are making 52-week highs. Look at the stocks that are making 1 month highs. So look at those strongest names there. Who's moving the most? That's where we got to be trading there. If you want to be up there with the good traders there. That's where they're looking. So we're going to be looking in the same areas.
Well, all those things that you've just talked about, we've been building a list, and we'll try and launch that next week for members to try a beta version of exactly a watch list of that, adding those filters near the 52-week highs, highest momentum for X period, bang, 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 we'll go through that. But as Gary said, look at last week if you want that first 10 minutes, and if you want something to review and say reflect on why my VCP trading works, because I stick to the rules, we'll put a link on my video to the right-hand side here with Mark Binavini's rules broken down, nice and detailed. Thank you very much, Gary Glover from Novus Capital.
Thanks, Chris.